So the pencil guy had a dream about being an atheist, and it was sad. And it's gonna make us all sad. Let's get sad together.
Hey guys,
Hey, where's the pencil? Show me the pencil. I want to see the pencil.
so I want to share a dream I had.
Literally the most interesting and compelling thing anyone can do in conversation.
So in my dream, I was an atheist again.
Oh, the being an atheist dream. Yeah, I have those all the time too. Yeah, like for example, the other day I had this dream where I was in my childhood bedroom, but it was like different. It was like weird. And then I realized I had to pee, and I couldn't figure out like, should I pee in the corner? Should I pee on the bed? Should I pee in the potted plant? And then I realized, wait a second, my bedroom doesn't have a potted plant. It never did. And then I realized, oh, that's because I'm actually in the mall. And now everybody in the mall is watching me run around looking for a place to pee, and wherever I choose to go, it's going to be horribly embarrassing and inappropriate. And then after a while, I woke up and took a pee. Now, you might say that doesn't sound much like an atheist dream, but bear in mind, the whole time I didn't believe in God.
And I've been a Christian for 3 years now. But in this dream, I was an atheist again, and my niece and nephews were over.
Oh no, you didn't dream you were the baby-eating kind of atheist, did you?
Like 4 or 5 of them, I forgot.
Oh, okay. As long as you just ate 4 or 5, that's not too bad.
And I was watching them, and I was looking at them and getting sad because, again, I was an atheist, and it was like their lives were flashing before my eyes, and I was seeing how they're happy now, they're playing, being kids, not a care in the world, but how they're going to slowly grow up and just, do what normal humans do and just die.
Yeah, kids grow up and have a life and do what normal humans do and also die. I would find it a lot more disturbing if that didn't happen. Like, what's wrong with this kid? It's been a kid for 1,000 years. This is weird. Like that creepy Kirsten Dunst vampire in that movie, whatever it was.
And they're going to, be rendered non-existent for eternity someday like everyone else.
Okay, kind of a strange, miserable way of looking at a nice thing. I don't really see why your first thought looking at a happy, playful child would be, that kid's gonna die and cease to exist forever. It's like, man, have you been spending all your time reading some kind of grim-ass philosophy? Just put the books down, step outside for a bit. It's possible to acknowledge the hard knocks of life without obsessing about it to the point that you start having dreams about it. It's possible to go outside and look at a bird and go, wow, what a nice bird. This sure is a pleasant moment here looking at this bird, without thinking that bird's gonna be a rotting corpse covered in maggots in a matter of just a few years. Or somebody gives you an awesome gift, like a sweet-ass brand new car, and instead of saying thank you, you're like, what's the point of this device? It's destined for the junkyard. All it's gonna do is rust out and fall apart and return to the earth. Might as well not even have bothered. Like, yeah, it's true, but if that's what pops into your head when you look at it, something's going on, man. Might want to work on that, not seeing the whole world through black-tinted glasses. Okay, that's just sunglasses. Bad metaphor, sorry.
And it made me sad, and I started crying in the dream as I was sitting on the couch watching them, but nobody around me noticed, that I was very sad and crying for them. And so I got up and I began to play with them and pick them up, hug them and kiss them, show them a lot of love before they eventually die.
Well, okay, what you're gonna get to here is guaranteed gonna be, if there's no heaven, everything's hopeless, death actually means death, oh no, and your ridiculous over-the-top response to this is the only one that makes any sense. The only outlook that's feasible on such a universe that it's possible for any human to ever have. But the funny thing is, those kids, those playing, laughing, joyful children, are gonna cease to exist regardless of whether your worldview or mine is true. They're going to grow up, they're going to learn the realities of life, lose their innocence, have to pay their taxes, drag themselves into work every day, whatever, and they will cease to be the people that you're looking at. It's called growing up. Those children, as you see them, inevitably disappear. And yet, when you're not in the middle of a dream about being some weird, nihilist, doom and gloom person, when you're in real life actually interacting with those kids, I bet you get a lot of joy out of them. There's a reason you're talking about them. I bet they pass on some of that infectious, childish attitude to you. Would be my guess. That happens to me too, regardless of what happens in the future. I mean, for all you know, those kids could grow up to be suicidally depressed, or hardcore drunks, or if nothing so extreme, at the very least, they're going to lose that childishness. And that does nothing whatsoever to diminish it. Nothing at all. In fact, it makes it something more valuable, something that has to be enjoyed while it lasts because it will end. If your kid was just a child forever, behaved that way forever, literally forever, well, it wouldn't really be the special time it is. You would not really appreciate it the same way that you do now. And again, I'm not talking about death here. I'm talking about endings to things, changes. Because death really is just one example in the much broader category of those kinds of things. You know, the reason I brought up my childhood bedroom in the example of the dream is because that is actually something that crops up reasonably often in my dreams. Because when I left the house I grew up in, it was a sort of a death. It was the end of an era, which to me basically represented my entire childhood. And everything associated with that. All my friends, all the places I knew, all the experiences I'd had. It wasn't just the end of that room or that house, it was the end of that entire life. A complete change. And as someone who doesn't really like change that much, it was pretty rough. But at the same time, it had to happen. And I'm far from unique in this. This happens to everybody, oftentimes in far more extreme ways than that. And within the context of this kind of a conversation, I failed to see the difference in kind between that sort of an ending and the ending of your life. Because, and I apologize for kind of jumping the gun here and jumping to conclusions, but we all know where this is going. I don't really see the difference because the point of this conversation is going to be, if something ends, it didn't matter. If it doesn't matter forever, it doesn't matter at all. If we can't all be enjoying the same old thing a billion years from now, then we can't enjoy it now. Because all we should be doing in any situation we're in is focusing on the end. We should not enjoy the party we're at, we should just focus on the fact that at some point it's going to end. This very easily could be your actual feeling on the matter. Maybe you're not just using this as Christian propaganda. This could actually be a dream you had and a feeling that you regularly have. But you have to understand, this is purely a matter of your subjective interpretation that you've allowed yourself to have, that you've created within yourself. Absolutely nothing mandates that you have to feel that way, that you have to interpret it in this incredibly grim, miserable way. That interpretation is not an objective feature of reality. Reality just is. How you feel about it and think about it is a totally separate issue over which you exercise some degree of control. That aspect of it is purely subjective. It's just in your head. It's not a realistic outlook. It's not dictated by reality. It's just you. And of course, most people don't have that outlook. Certainly not if they're of good mental health. Atheist, Christian really doesn't matter. Again, I'm not even talking about death and the afterlife here. I'm talking about the day-to-day changes within your life. Most people don't choose to interpret everything through a lens of constant misery and pain and ending and loss. Most likely you don't either. Most likely when you look at those kids in real life, your first thought is not, well, this moment of me spending time with them is just going to end, so why should I bother enjoying it while it lasts? I highly doubt that you think about that in almost any area of your life. And if you do, I really think that you have to put some serious work into trying to change that, because that's incredibly self-destructive. Now again, sorry I've got way ahead of the video, but that felt all worth saying all at once. And it's pretty obvious that it's going to be very applicable, so let's see.
You know, because this is all there is. And even that wasn't enough. It still felt empty, almost like I was angry at, my siblings for breeding. Almost like, why did you bring children into this world? If they're just going to die someday, they're going to watch you die, and there's just nothing there. Eventually, everybody dies, and the sun will, stop shining, and all life will be gone forever.
So is it worse to be non-existent later if you're alive now than just to be non-existent the whole time? Because you say you were blaming your siblings for having kids, which is normally what people say when they think life itself is really awful, Oh, this world is so bad, there's wars and political conflicts and struggles about whatever, or some kids are going to have it really bad. And so it's a cruelty to bring kids into the world, antinatalism. But normally when I've seen it, that's been a statement on life itself, The life that kid is going to have is so bad that you never should have made the kid live through it. But you're not talking about that. You're just talking about the fact that the person's going to be dead in the end. You did mention that the kids will live through their parents' deaths, but really, this entire thing is about how life doesn't matter at all, nothing's important, it's all empty, because you're going to die in the end, so really, at that point, who cares if you live through your parents' death? If the momentary good things don't matter at all, then neither do the momentary bad ones, right? Of course, weirdly, you seem to be assigning some actual significance to bad experiences like watching your parents die, but the significance of the good ones is utterly discounted. It seems like a bit of a bias. But still, I think the main point was you're a bad person for bringing a kid into the world now because the kid will cease to exist at the end, as if to imply that never having existed is somehow better than not having existed, then existing for a little bit, and then not existing again. I'm really curious about this. I mean, what makes non-existence become worse merely by the fact of having existed before it? I mean, I would have thought that you're sort of assigning insignificance to life, and that doesn't mean bad significance, it means insignificance, no significance. But you're actually sort of assigning major significance to it. The flavor of ceasing to exist becomes different, becomes worse, having existed at all. That's some serious significance. I'm having a lot of trouble understanding your worldview on this, or former worldview, whatever. I'm having a lot of difficulty making any sense of it because it seems kind of self-contradictory in some ways.
So, yeah, it was very sad. And I remembered, when I woke up, it made me realize that's how I felt when I used to be an atheist and then agnostic.
Yeah, I gathered as much, and that is absolutely fascinating. What was it about your experiences that made you start interpreting the world in this way? And more interesting, in my opinion, what was it about your conversion to Christianity that made you stop doing that? Because you have the same problem in Christianity, as I said, with things ending and things changing and things being transient in life. That doesn't change when you convert to Christianity. Sure, you can cross off one thing. You can say, okay, at the end, people go and keep existing in heaven. People only, nothing else, unless you think your pets go to heaven or something. But even so, you're left with all the other forms of the same thing in your entire life. All the other losses, all the other experiences that take place in a limited amount of time. All these things you learn about as you grow older and you just kind of have to learn to deal with because that's part of growing up. I would be very curious to find out how Christianity in any way helped you with that, despite the fact that it addresses none of it, but I would be highly surprised if I do find out because, let's face it, what you're going to talk about is death and afterlife and why you need Christianity for that, and all the rest is just going to go ignored.
And, just this existential crisis that I couldn't get out of my head, how meaningless everything is, no matter what you do, what you accomplish, what you achieve, even if everything in your bucket list you have achieved and fulfilled, so what?
Well, again, that's another thing that goes with Christianity, right? Christianity, sure, you live on in the afterlife, but nothing you achieved on earth matters in any way whatsoever. There's only one achievement that matters in Christianity, and that's conversion. What else matters? Did you start a business? Did you invent some new kind of light bulb? Did you discover a megalodon shark living under the Mariana Trench? Did you write a book? Did you make a YouTube video? Who the fuck cares? You might as well have just sat on your ass. The only thing that has any eternal relevance is your belief. So again, I'm not seeing how Christianity fixes the problem. You're not dealing with an atheist-Christian divide here. You're dealing with an issue of perspective on events in your life, not the events after your life.
And I remember this is why I used to have suicidal thoughts when I was atheist agnostic for many years because I couldn't get this out of my head.
Yeah, well, okay, I'm glad you found a solution that works for you. All I'm saying to you is it doesn't make any sense, and most atheists are not going to feel this way because this is not a consequence of atheism, this is a consequence of your very warped perspective. And if it was really that bad that you're still having nightmares about it, then it's good that you managed to find something that you could use to trick your brain into rejecting this way of interpreting reality. I'm happy for you, but I think you're shooting yourself in the foot by trying to assign this way of thinking to all other atheists, which is what you did in the 3-part series that I did before, where you said atheists are all sad and unhappy and whatever because they think about the world the way you did. When you say that to someone about whom it's just false, you don't really make things easier on yourself when the task at hand is to convince them that you're right about everything else in the universe.
It got me to thinking about scenarios. Like, let's say an atheist parents, they have, let's say, 4 children, and 3 of their children get kidnapped and murdered, and it's very sad.
Why is it sad? Atheists think nothing matters because everything ends, right? So it's not going to be sad. It's going to be completely irrelevant and meaningless, like everything else. If it ends now, if it ends later, just another pointless event. I'll just go about my day. Which again makes me very confused about your dream. Why were you sad that the kids were eventually going to die? It's just meaningless, right? Without eternal consequences, literally nothing matters. It has no meaning at all, so there's nothing to be sad about. Except that that's not quite true, is it? You're not quite as married to the idea that eternity creates importance as you would like us to believe. Maybe as you would like yourself to believe.
This example might seem extreme, but it happens, guys. Have you guys ever watched the news?
No, I've never watched the news. I'm an atheist. Who cares? I just stare at a blank wall all day. I'm not even making a video right now. I'm just standing here talking to myself. If somebody happens to be filming and recording it, well, they must be a Christian to even bother.
One of their sons, let's say he's 10 years old, he might ask his parents, he's very sad and crying, like, what happened to my siblings? Will I ever see them again? And, are the atheists just going to say, well, honey, you're not going to see them again?
Well, yeah. I'm not going to lie to my kid. I'm not going to present false hope. I'm not a monster. Now, of course, I'm going to do it in a gentle way. I'm not just going to say, no, of course not. What are you, stupid? But yeah, I'm not going to bullshit. I'm not going to try to keep the wound open the kid's whole life by saying, yeah, your siblings are still alive and you'll see them again. How the hell is that supposed to help that kid get closure? And also, even in that moment, wouldn't that just confuse the kid horribly? The parents wailing with grief, and the kid asks basically what happened, what actually happened here, why are you so sad? Asks a question about death, and the parents say, oh, don't worry, there's no issue. Your siblings are still alive and in heaven, and we're going to see them and have eternity with them, and it's going to be wonderful. And nothing too terribly severe happened here. We're just going to have a little break from them and meet up with them again later. Wouldn't the disconnect between that message and the actual response of the parents be incredibly confusing and disturbing to that kid? If the kid could not get any sort of a straight answer about why the parents were sad and why it was an actually bad event, but it clearly was, and the parents are clearly hiding something, wouldn't that be kind of really cruel to the poor kid who's just trying to figure things out? To figure out why his parents have been brought to such a state? I don't know, it just seems like it would be to me. When I was 4 years old, my brother died, and I don't believe I was ever told these weird lies about that. My parents don't believe in heaven or anything, so certainly not that. Then when I was, I think in grade 2, my grandpa died. And then when I was kind of a young teenager kind of range, my grandma died. And in all those cases, it's sad, but it's better to know what happened. It's better to know, okay, something's changed and it's not going back to the way it was. Something bad happened. I'm in on the understanding of it. I'm not confused, and now I can work on accepting it. It might be harder in the short term, but it's healthier in the long term. It just seems like by far the kindest thing. And the other thing is, when the kid asks you a question straight up, if your first response is to lie to spare the kid's feelings, I don't see that doing a lot for the trust. I think that could have some consequences in the future. Yeah, I can trust you to tell the truth about some things, but not when it really matters.
They're just gone, That's it, and someday you'll be gone too.
Well, obviously I'm not going to say that in that moment. What the hell? What possible reason would I have to mention that other child's mortality in that moment? That's a bizarre idea for a response, but anyway. Forget the kid for a second who's sad, who doesn't understand the situation. What about the parents? Because the parents know better. The parents know what's actually going on, which is death happened. They learned about the concept and may very well have experienced it with other people that they loved before, and to some extent or another would have had to come to terms with it, at least in the abstract, if they've never had anyone else they love die. Just like the remaining sibling is unfortunately going to have to do now. The parents understand. The life came to an end. They know why they're sad. Even if they're Christians, they know why they're sad. Somewhere deep down, if you really believed in Christianity, you would say, well, okay, now there's a little blip, a little period of absence. You might be a little bit upset that you have to wait a little while to see them again. The kind of sadness you might have when your kid goes off to college or something and you won't see them for a few months. But you wouldn't have the crushing grief as if something were truly gone. You would be celebrating. My children are in heaven. They're waiting for me. I raised them to believe. I think they truly accepted Jesus into their hearts. I've helped them to avoid hell, which, according to this comment of yours, you don't think is like fire and pain and whatever. It's just darkness, which I think a parent might still be a little bit upset if their kid got sent to a place of infinite eternal darkness, but beside the point. But the parent would think, I've helped my child avoid hell. My child is now in heaven, guaranteed a blissful eternity. I don't have to be worried anymore. Everything's great, and I'll see them in barely any time. Whenever I die, if it's in 50 years, whatever, well, compared to eternity, that's nothing. Woohoo! Problem solved! But that's not what happens. Christians and atheists respond the same way. They're destroyed by an event like that because something's actually gone. Something wrong has happened that's never going to be fixed. A parent could be told in that situation that it's something to celebrate, and it's not going to work. Either of these groups of parents are going to have to work through their grief, and either way, they're never going to be the same again. Why is that? There should be a very different outcome in these two cases. Grief from one family and joy from the other, regularly, basically every time. But there isn't. And this is why, of course, you don't feel any difference in sympathy when a Christian family loses a member than when an atheist one does. You don't feel happy for the Christian family. That would be sick, because their family member died.
Imagine how traumatic that is for a child.
I'm quite aware. It's traumatic for everyone involved. There's no real changing that at this point. It's a triple homicide of the kid's siblings, of the parents' kids. Is this really what you're going to argue? Atheism is uniquely hopeless because it's really sad and traumatic when a number of children from a single family are kidnapped and murdered? What else should it be, man? Do you want them to be tap dancing on the roof? Do you think if they're Christians instead, they're gonna be?
They already lost, 3 of his siblings, and now he has to hear this.
He has to hear what? That he lost them? He knows. I mean, that's the way you put it. He already lost his siblings, right? So he's sad about that. And then he has to hear that he lost them. Yes, he's confronted with a terrible truth. Would I rather that child not be in that situation, not have lost those siblings? Yeah, of course. But he did. And there's only one path forward, which is through the sadness, through the feeling of loss. And that's going to apply regardless of what religion that kid is raised in, or lack thereof. Loss is loss and grief is grief. And sure, maybe in some cases you can temporarily patch that up or hold it off with some kind of bullshit. You see kindness in that, I'm sorry, but I don't. Not at all. It's not cruel if someone says that to a kid, yeah, your sibling's in heaven or whatever, because they truly believe it. But what if they don't? What if you tell that to a kid not because you believe it's true, but because you believe it will just lessen the pain a little bit for a little while until it all comes crashing down later? I see a hell of a lot wrong with that. And by the way, I really hope that you're not going to propose that people should start believing in Christianity because it lets them avoid dealing with sadness. Even if it did, which I'm really not convinced about at all, that's not a reason to start adopting beliefs. The reason to adopt a belief is because you're convinced that it's actually true. And I hope that was your reason as well. I hope it wasn't just that you felt bad and you attributed that to atheism and became a Christian.
I mean, I don't know. Will you even tell your children that? Or will you lie to them and say, well, they're in a better place. Yeah, they're in a better place, in the afterlife. They're in heaven.
No, I definitely won't say that. With my daughter, for one thing, she met her great-grandfather before he died, and I did not lie to her about it. And also, we brought a bird into the house, a Bohemian waxwing, that was having some problems outside in the bitter, bitter cold of winter. And we had hoped to release it once it recovered, or in the spring maybe, and just help it survive the winter. But instead it died, and we were all quite sad about it. And again, I'm not going to tell lies about it. And in both cases, she actually took it quite well. If you explain death to a child in a way that the child can understand, it is something they're capable of coping with. You don't have to sugarcoat things for a child. When our cat and our dog die, I don't need to be telling her things like, well, they're in heaven now. She will be sad. She'll feel like the world's ending for a while, like I did when my dog and my cat died when I was a kid. And presumably when my brother died, although I don't remember that all that well, to be honest. But yeah, death feels harsh. It feels like a complete disaster because it is. It feels like you'll never feel better ever again. But you will. There's this prevailing attitude of attributing extreme weakness to kids, but I think with things like this, they're actually, in a lot of ways, more adaptable than we are. Not to say in any way that it's easy on them either, but I just think people don't give kids enough credit in matters like this. They're real people, they're able to understand things, they're able to handle things when they need to, especially if it's put to them in a way that they can comprehend. And I just think this thing of sort of talking down to them is, I don't know, in my opinion, not very helpful. And either way, just not necessary.
I mean, would you tell them the truth, lie?
What do you mean by the truth and lie? The truth that their siblings are dead and the lie that they're in heaven, or vice versa?
Or, I don't know. It's pretty sad.
Death is sad, yes. I don't know what to tell you. I can't make it less sad for you.
Also, like in funerals, when somebody loses somebody, I mean, what do you say to somebody that lost a loved one? You just say, well, I'm sorry for your loss.
Maybe. I mean, it's a pretty basic thing to say if you don't know the person all that well. If they're not a close family member or whatever, then that's probably quite appropriate. Just saying, I sympathize with you. I feel some pain about this as well, especially because you feel pain about it. That seems reasonable enough. I don't know if you've dealt much with death, but personally I find that a lot of the time it's just hard to think of anything to say. Everything kind of comes off as trite and pointless and, like a repeat of something that somebody said to someone else before, or that you've said to someone else before when somebody died. I can only imagine people have a similar kind of feeling when they say stuff like they're in a better place, or, religious condolences. Even though they think the afterlife is this important thing and stuff, it probably still feels a little cliched, inadequate, at least a lot of the time.
That's it. So what?
Yeah, I know. It's not enough. Nothing anyone says is going to be enough. Ever. You can't bring the person back. You can't undo what happened. So I agree. That's it. So what? But that's all there is. It's all there can be. Denial and fantasy won't change that. What will help, though, and I don't mean after somebody dies, I mean you right now, is working through your issues on the subject. You clearly have an immense fear of loss, to the point that you'll adopt belief systems just because you feel like it'll help you avoid the feeling of ever losing anything, or anyone. That's a problem with you. Just because you have this odd hang-up doesn't mean everyone else does. I understand loss is going to happen. It's going to be rough. I don't look forward to it, but I'm also not going to run from it. I haven't in the past, and I won't in the future. And when it happened, eventually I got over it. I don't spend all my time obsessing about past losses or future ones, or wishing desperately that I could deny the reality of it. So if you want to talk about your personal feelings on the matter, go ahead, but don't try to broaden it out to include every atheist on the planet. That just makes you look like a dumbass.
You're sorry for my loss? That's very comforting, thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Seriously, what would you prefer for me to tell you? Nothing happened? Everything's just fine? This is all a dream and you can wake up now? What do you want? Would you prefer your loved ones in a place of infinite darkness, separated from God forever? Is that better?
I am comforted by that in this moment of grieving. That's what I wanted to hear, your apology. What does that even mean? I'm sorry for your loss.
Well, it means I'm feeling sorrow because you're feeling pain and I care about you. Your pain gives me pain. That's what it means. I really don't see the problem with it. I get that it's inadequate, but it's no more inadequate than anything else. It's fine.
It means nothing. It's just empty words.
No, it's not. I mean, yeah, it's a cliche. Yeah, it's something that maybe people say without really meaning it. On the other hand, sometimes they do. Either way, the words themselves are not just empty words. It's quite a meaningful statement, really. I think it's actually quite well formulated. If somebody told me that and I thought they were sincere and they really meant those words, I think that would mean something to me.
And you might think, well, I'm trying to make them feel better. Yeah, good for you. You are. Okay, good for you. But it's still empty. It's still empty. It's all meaningless.
Oh, back to this. Yeah, it really doesn't matter what you say, does it, then? You could say a magic spell and literally summon their kid back from the dead and it wouldn't matter. Because even so, it's not going to last forever, and so it's still empty and meaningless, completely. No matter what you do. No matter whatever happens. Why are we talking about death here? Death is really not the issue. Because what you're insisting has to be the normal reaction in the absence of an afterlife belief is to feel at every moment of your life as if you've just experienced the death of every one of your loved ones, because eventually they will die. And so to feel that your life is totally devoid of meaning and to feel absolutely inconsolably sad during every second of your existence, that's what you're insisting on. Well, no, I'm sorry. You can do that if you want, but I'm not really inclined to accept your premises or play along. I'm not going to sit here trying to drive myself into a state of permanent misery and grief just to feel like I'm conforming to your ideas about how people should be interpreting reality.
Atheism is it's dark. It's a very morbid, worldview.
As a lifelong atheist, I hold not one single one of the opinions that you've put forth as being atheism. So it would seem to me that it's not atheism that's the dark, morbid worldview, it's whatever the fuck this is.
And, some atheists, they say, no, we don't have a worldview.
Okay, I'm an atheist, and also I have a worldview. Argue in the comments about whether the worldview is influenced by atheism. It probably is to some extent, to be honest. I mean, at the very least, it kind of leads on to some assumptions or lack of assumptions about reality that influence how you see the world, so it's at least an ingredient in there, right? But yeah, I am an atheist. I have a worldview that bears no resemblance to your worldview, which, as far as I'm concerned, is something that you're taking as like a necessary logical consequence of a lack of a god, and yet which in no way whatsoever necessarily follows from it. What I'm saying is you seem to be putting this worldview forward as an inevitable, rational consequence of non-belief or disbelief in gods. Something so unavoidable in those who lack that belief that this could be described as just the worldview of everyone who lacks said belief. And yet it's not. It's just not. You can insist as many times as you want that atheists must and do accept what you're imposing upon us here. You know, that we must accept as a rational necessity what your irrational emotions convinced you to believe. But that doesn't mean we do. It is interesting, though, to hear, to get a little bit of expansion on what you meant before in the other video when you insisted that atheists are not happy no matter how much they say they are, that we're all just sad, miserable people, and so on and so on. It's interesting to get a bit more of a look into where those ideas are coming from within you. I really do think, though, that you would be better off if you stopped kind of dragging yourself down this path of thought, trying to see things in the worst possible way. But you do you.
Like, even a desert scorpion has a worldview.
Does it? Well, that's a question ripe for argument. Hey, at least you picked an animal with a brain. Not much of one, but still. That's a start, I guess.
You don't have a worldview?
Hold on, when people tell you atheism is not their worldview, they're telling you atheism is not their worldview. Not that they don't have a worldview. And if they say something like, there's no atheist worldview, or atheists don't have a worldview, what they mean is there's no shared worldview among all atheists. Because atheism does not tell you a great deal about what you actually believe about the world. Which is true. Of course, if somebody calls themselves an atheist, you can probably make some reasonably confident guesses about a few things they might believe, and about a fair number of things that won't be in their worldview. But it's a big difference from if somebody says, I'm a Catholic or I'm a Muslim. You can get a lot more information from those statements because that's basically saying I adhere to a preset worldview with all these beliefs included. And that's what people are trying to tell you.
Anyways, it's just a very sad and depressing worldview.
By the way, I love the argument about the worldview. The desert scorpion has a worldview, therefore atheism is a worldview. A dubious premise and even more dubious reasoning.
And I felt it before. Again, that's why suicides are number one, and atheism lead the world in suicide. I've shared that with you before.
It's very possible. I would kind of wonder if the belief that suicide sends you to hell would have something to do with that, but let's just take it at face value. I don't even want to bother looking up numbers, looking up studies, because I'm much more interested in the nature of the claim itself, more than the factual basis of it. So let's for the moment just accept that atheists do have a higher suicide rate, and it's a consequence of them having worldviews that make them feel depressed more often. I have some serious questions about that, but granted for the sake of argument. It really doesn't help that they have religiously motivated people like you trying to convince them to see the world like this. Do you actually think you're helping someone here by trying to convince people to see the world this way? Like, you're presenting a worldview here, and that worldview is either everyone lives forever and everything lasts forever and is perfect, or you should see everything as catastrophic, you should only think about death and endings, and you should never be happy with anything ever. Not for any rational reason, but just because you say so. This is the dichotomy that you're pushing people to accept. You're trying to convince people to accept the subjective bullshit premises that you accepted that drove you into that dark place before. Why? To what benefit to anyone? If people are actually convinced after watching your video here, which fortunately I don't think anyone will be, but if they were, they're not going to be convinced of the truth of your religion. They're not going to be convinced that your God exists all of a sudden because you've presented nothing to support that position. You don't even talk about it as if it matters. You've said not one word about truth. Instead, you would just make them feel depressed. Unhappy. You're basically promoting a suicidal mentality. You're attempting to contribute to the problem that you claim exists, the rates of depression and therefore suicide among atheists. If you were going to promote some arbitrary, subjective, non-theistic worldview without trying to convince people of the truth of your religion, then if you consider suicide of atheists a problem, you would think that you would be trying to convince them to see the world as a brighter place, a more hopeful place, which of course is entirely consistent with atheism, because any one of these ways of interpreting the world is as subjective, as much of a personal narrative as any other. So the fact that you choose this approach makes me kind of wonder where your priorities are, although I already know where your priorities are.
Yeah, it's just, it's very dark. There's no hope.
Of the two of us, who's preaching darkness and hopelessness right now?
It's just nothing. We're just evolved bags of blood.
Oh, we're going to do that thing, and we're going to say stuff in derogatory ways and then put just in front of it and pretend that that means something. Oh, you believe in God, so you believe I'm just like some kind of spooky, ethereal ghost thing, that I don't even have a body, I'm just some kind of immaterial nothing, just a fart in the void.
With no free will.
Don't even get me started on free will in a universe with an omniscient God. I've talked about that enough times in the past, and this video is long enough as it is.
And just addicted to dopamine hits. We try to accumulate as much dopamine hits as possible before we die.
Yeah, a good Christian man would just ignore his nieces and nephews, because, you wouldn't want to do anything for that dopamine hit.
And, what are you going to say on your deathbed? Yay, I accumulated so much dopamine hits. I'm so fulfilled. I could die now. Okay, bye-bye. This was fun. This was interesting.
No, that'd be really weird. Nobody talks like that.
How weird is that? Nobody says that.
Glad we agree.
It's just, yay, dopamine hits. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm getting the impression that you don't.
We're all just, these moist computers
We're all just derogatory mocking description of thing. Again.
addicted to this drug called dopamine. Gotta have my fix. And it's never enough.
Yeah, I know, man. It's so never enough that people were so upset that at some point their life ends and they won't get any more dopamine hits that they made up an afterlife that's nothing but an infinitely long dopamine hit. But the atheists are the ones unreasonably addicted to dopamine.
Notice how it's never enough?
Yes, I noticed that. I have to say, I really do not understand the mentality of being so desperate for the hits to keep coming that all it takes for people to start salivating is to think about the big old long hit they think is coming after they die.
It's not fulfilling. This atheistic lifestyle, the agnosticism that I used to live, and I know others, it's you eat something good, dopamine hit. Okay, it's not fulfilled. Let me go watch a movie. Let me go watch porn. Let me go have sex. Do this drug. Let me go hang out with them. And it's like, you can't just sit still and think. It's scary.
Oh, right, I forgot. You're the guy I said, I don't think your problem was that you were an atheist. I think your problem was that you were acting like a fucking idiot, right? That was you, right? Yeah, well, that again.
You start getting an existential crisis, so you have to fill yourself up with entertainment and constant, seeking that dragon, that dopamine, fire-breathing beast that will never fill you. Only Lord Jesus will fill you, guys.
How do you know, man? It sounds like you've tried two things. Number one, a bunch of stupid, superficial nonsense to try to distract yourself from a childish fear of death that you never bothered to get over. And Jesus. Not exactly an exhaustive list of attempts made there to find personal fulfillment. It's a bit hard to take you seriously when you say you know the one and only thing that can ever bring any kind of fulfillment to anyone on the planet.
Sorry, am I ranting now? I feel like I'm ranting. This video was supposed to be about the dream I had. I'm just ranting now. I don't know.
Ha ha ha, that's great. Okay, that's the end of the video. So thank you all for watching. If you would be so kind, please do give the video a like and click subscribe if you haven't. If you really like the channel, please do consider supporting. Even just a couple bucks a month goes a long way. And huge thanks to every one of my supporters who's already made that decision. For early access, sign up to the email list at list.logicked.com, and I'll see you next time.